He offered her a small fortune to spend just one night with him. Haunted by memories she swore to forget, she accepted without knowing why. If you enjoy love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening from. We'll continue. The cutting wind across the hills of Berkshire carried more than the scent of hydrangeas and the distant echo of a faded aristocratic past. On that grey March morning, it whispered secrets that only the century-old stones of the Blackwood estate knew. The imposing structure rose like a sleeping giant among ancient trees, its tall windows surveying the valley with the sovereignty of one who guarded stories that should never see the light of day. Emma Richardson adjusted the white apron over her dark dress, her fingers trembling imperceptibly as she arranged roses from the garden at the main entrance. At 25, she possessed the silent precision of someone who had learned early that invisibility was her greatest protection. Her brown hair was always fastened in an impeccable bun, and her almond-shaped eyes avoided prolonged contact with anyone who crossed the corridors of the property. She had worked as housekeeper at the estate for 3 years, the youngest in the Blackwood family history. The nuns at St. Joseph's Orphanage, where she had grown up after losing her parents in an accident when she was only 3 years old, had prepared her well for a life of discreet service and unquestionable obedience. But they hadn't prepared her to carry the weight of a terrible night that still haunted her in fragmented nightmares. The sound of tires on the gravel entrance made her look up. A black Mercedes-Benz approached slowly, as if time itself hesitated to permit its arrival. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard whispers among the other staff about the return of the property's true owner, but she had imagined they were merely rumors. Nathan Blackwood stepped out of the vehicle with the somber elegance of a man carrying the world on his shoulders. At 43, he possessed the magnetic presence of men who built empires on the ashes of others. His dark hair had prematurely grey strands at the temples, and his grey-blue eyes seemed capable of piercing the soul of anyone who dared look at them directly. He wore an impeccable suit that couldn't disguise the tension in his broad shoulders. He didn't look at Emma when he passed her at the entrance, but she felt his presence like a wave of heat followed by an inexplicable chill. He climbed the marble steps with measured steps, each movement calculated, as if returning to a battlefield where he had lost a crucial war. "Miss Richardson." The deep voice made her shudder. Nathan had stopped at the top of the staircase, without turning completely. "Prepare the master suite. I'll be home for an indefinite period." She nodded silently, watching him disappear down the corridors like a shadow that had finally found its place of origin. For the past 3 years, the master suite had remained sealed, like a mausoleum dedicated to memories that no one dared disturb. Now she would have to open that sanctuary and make it habitable again. As she walked through the corridors toward the main wing, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed in the manor. The air seemed denser, charged with an energy she couldn't identify. The older housemaids whispered among themselves, casting concerned glances in her direction, as if they knew something she didn't. The master suite occupied the entire 3rd floor of the east wing. When Emma opened the heavy oak doors, she was greeted by dimness and the smell of mildew mixed with a feminine perfume that still lingered in the air, even after 3 years of absence. The burgundy velvet curtains blocked almost all natural light, creating an environment that seemed to belong to a disturbing dream. She began to work methodically, opening windows, changing sheets, dusting furniture that seemed like silent witnesses to dramas she could only imagine. On the vanity, some feminine objects still remained untouched. A bottle of French perfume, pearl earrings, a small diary with a golden lock that inexplicably aroused her curiosity. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor alerted her. Nathan appeared in the doorway, watching her work with an intensity that made her heart race. He had changed from his suit to a white shirt and dark dress pants, but maintained the same intimidating aura. "Leave it as it is," he said, his voice laden with a melancholy that cut like a sharp blade. "Some things should remain exactly as they were." Emma lowered her eyes, feeling the weight of his gaze upon her. "Yes, sir. Is there anything else you need?" "Dinner at 8, in the library, and Emma—" She raised her eyes, meeting his for an instant that seemed eternal. "Don't be afraid of me." "Not yet." The words echoed in her mind long after he had left, carrying a meaning she couldn't decipher. As she finished arranging the suite, Emma felt that she had crossed an invisible line. Something had begun in that moment, something that would forever change the controlled and predictable atmosphere of her existence at the Blackwood Estate. The Blackwood Estate's library was a sanctuary of knowledge and shadows, where thousands of leather-bound volumes kept the secrets of generations. The shelves rose to the ornate ceiling, reachable only by a sliding mahogany ladder that creaked softly when someone moved it. On that March evening, as rain drummed against the window panes in a hypnotic rhythm, Emma carried a silver tray with Nathan's dinner. Her hands trembled slightly when she knocked on the library door. Since he had returned that morning, a strange tension hung over the entire property. The other staff seemed to avoid talking about the master, averting their eyes whenever she tried to extract information about his 3 years of absence. "Enter!" the deep voice echoed from within. Emma pushed the heavy door and entered the room. Nathan was seated in the brown leather armchair near the fireplace, where the fire crackled in low flames that cast dancing shadows on the book-lined walls. He didn't raise his eyes when she approached the side table to set down the tray. "Would you prefer that I serve or—" "Stay," he interrupted, finally looking at her. "How long have you worked here, Emma?" 3 years, sir," she replied, keeping her eyes lowered as she arranged the plates with mechanical precision. 3 years, he repeated, as if savoring the words. "So, you arrived shortly after I left." She nodded silently, feeling the weight of his gaze upon her. There was something in the way he observed her that made her feel exposed, as if he could see beyond the layers of protection she had built over the years. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the armchair across from him. "I can't, sir. It wouldn't be appropriate." A bitter smile curved Nathan's lips. Appropriate. Interesting word from someone who lives in a house where appropriation was never exactly respected. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in his words that suggested knowledge of secrets she had never imagined existed. Reluctantly, she sat on the edge of the armchair, hands crossed in her lap, shoulders tense as if ready to flee at any moment. "Tell me about yourself," he said, serving himself a glass of red wine that seemed to have the color of blood under the golden firelight. "There isn't much to tell, sir. I grew up at St. Joseph's Orphanage, studied through high school, learned domestic service from the sisters, and—" "That's not you," he interrupted, leaning slightly forward. "That's your history. I want to know who you are when no one is looking. What haunts you when the silence becomes too heavy?" Nathan's words struck her like a sharp blade, touching wounds she had buried so deep that sometimes she pretended they didn't exist. Her eyes filled with unshed tears and she struggled to maintain her composure. I don't understand what you mean, sir." "Of course you do," he said softly, his voice carrying a disturbing understanding. "I recognize the scars because I have my own. There's something in your eyes, Emma, something familiar to me, a pain you carry like a sacred burden." She rose abruptly, her heart beating so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Excuse me, sir. I need to clean up the kitchen." "Emma." The way he said her name made her stop at the door, her trembling hand on the doorknob. "One last thing." She turned slowly, meeting those grey-blue eyes that seemed capable of reading her soul. "It's been a long time since I felt that someone understood what it means to carry secrets that can destroy you," he said, rising from the armchair with feline elegance. "Perhaps that's why you're here. Perhaps it's not a coincidence." He approached her with measured steps like a predator who had found his prey, but without the typical violence of the hunt. There was something almost reverent in the way he moved, as if she were something sacred and dangerous at the same time. When he was just inches from her, Nathan extended his hand and lightly touched her face, his thumb caressing her cheek in a gesture that was simultaneously tender and possessive. Emma felt her entire body tremble at the contact, a visceral reaction that frightened her more than any threat could have. "Don't be afraid of what you might come to feel," he whispered. "Be afraid only of what you might come to discover." She left the library as if fleeing a fire, but carrying with her the burning sensation of his touch and the disturbing echo of his words. That night, while lying in her small bed in the back room, Emma couldn't sleep. Something had awakened inside her, something that had remained dormant since that terrible night at the orphanage, and for the first time in years, she wondered if it was possible that someone could know her shadows and still choose to stay. The next 3 days passed like a silent dance between two wounded souls. Nathan moved through the estate like an elegant ghost, appearing at the most unexpected moments. When Emma arranged flowers in the hall, when she folded clothes in the laundry room, when she organized the books he had left scattered throughout the library. He never said anything, just observed with those penetrating eyes that seemed to decipher every thought she tried to hide. Emma, in turn, found herself hyper-aware of his presence. The sound of his footsteps on the floor above made her pause, whatever activity she was performing. The scent of his masculine cologne, a mixture of sandalwood and something indefinably dangerous, permeated the spaces through which he passed, creating an atmosphere of expectation that kept her constantly alert. On the fourth night, a violent storm broke over the Berkshire Hills. The winds howled among the ancient trees like tormented souls, and lightning illuminated the manor with ghostly flashes that made shadows dance on the walls. Emma had finished her tasks and was preparing to retire to her room when she heard the bell ring 3 times, the signal Nathan used when he desired some service. She climbed the stairs with racing heart, carrying a tray with tea and cookies that she had prepared instinctively. The master suite was shrouded in dimness, illuminated only by candles he had lit in various candelabras scattered throughout the room. The golden flickering light created an intimate and disturbing atmosphere. Nathan was seated in the armchair near the window, watching the storm outside. He had exchanged his formal suit for a white shirt, with the top buttons open and dark pants. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. Next to him on the side table was a half-empty bottle of cognac and an almost empty glass. "Leave it there and come here," he said without turning, his voice hoarser than usual. Emma set the tray on the dresser and approached hesitantly. When she was a few feet from him, Nathan finally looked at her, and she was shocked by the intensity of pain she saw in his eyes. It was as if all the defenses he maintained during the day had crumbled, revealing an open wound that bled in silence. "Do you know what the problem is with houses like this, Emma?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the surroundings. "They're built to keep secrets, but never to heal them, only to preserve them like embalmed mummies." She remained silent, feeling that any word would be an intrusion into a deeply intimate moment of vulnerability. "3 years ago, I lost the only person I ever truly loved," he continued, his gaze lost in the storm outside. "Rebecca died in this house, in this room, while I was in Boston, closing a deal I thought more important than staying by her side. When I returned, it was too late." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. She had heard whispers about Rebecca among the older staff, but had never known the details of the tragedy that had led Nathan to distance himself from everything. "She was pregnant." His voice broke slightly. "Our child, our dreams. Everything died with her that night, and I became a living ghost." A particularly strong bolt of lightning illuminated the room, and in the harsh white light, Emma saw the tears that silently descended Nathan's face. Without thinking, moved by an impulse she couldn't control, she approached and gently touched his shoulder. He turned to her then, his eyes red and devastated, and held her hands with a strength that was simultaneously desperate and gentle. "Do you want to know why I came back?" he asked, his voice reduced to a harsh whisper. "Because I can no longer live carrying this guilt alone, because I need to feel something beyond this constant pain. And when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to live with invisible scars." Emma tried to pull her hands away, but he held them more firmly, not hurting, just preventing her from fleeing. "Nathan, Listen," he interrupted, rising from the armchair so that they were face to face. "I'm going to make a proposal that may seem obscene, but it's the only way I can imagine for both of us to find some kind of peace." She tried to back away, but he followed, gently cornering her against the bookshelf behind her. "I'll give you the equivalent of what you earn in 6 months of work," he said, his voice controlled but carrying an intensity that made her heart race. "If you spend this night with me, just this night, no questions, no judgments, no promises for the future." The shock hit her like a punch to the stomach. "How dare you make me such a proposal?" "Because we are 2 castaways in the same ocean of loneliness," he answered, raising his hand to touch her face again. "Because I saw in your eyes the same hunger for genuine connection that consumes me from within. And because maybe we can heal each other in ways we can't imagine." Emma pushed him forcefully, her eyes shining with indignation and something more complex that she didn't want to name. "I am not a prostitute you can buy." "No," he agreed softly. "You are much more dangerous than that. You are someone who could make me feel alive again, and that terrifies me more than any deal I've ever closed." She ran toward the door but stopped when he said her name once more, the tone laden with a sadness that cut like a blade. "The offer stands, Emma. Not because I want to buy you, but because I need to discover if I'm still capable of feeling something beyond this constant pain." Emma couldn't sleep during that entire stormy night. Nathan's words echoed in her mind like a disturbing mantra, mingling with memories she had buried so long ago that sometimes she doubted their veracity. Lying in her narrow bed in the back room, she pressed her palms against her closed eyes, trying to push away the fragmented images that insisted on resurfacing. Rough hands, threatening whispers, the sensation of suffocation that had made her swear she would never allow a man to touch her again. But there was something in the raw vulnerability that Nathan had demonstrated, in the way his tears seemed to scratch her soul, that had awakened a primitive restlessness in her chest. It wasn't physical desire, at least not only that. It was something deeper and more disturbing, the inexplicable need to understand another human being's pain, and perhaps discover if two broken souls could find some kind of mutual healing. The next morning she went down to the kitchen earlier than usual, hoping that the familiar routine of preparing coffee and organizing meals could restore some sense of normalcy to her existence. But when she opened the drawer where she kept the kitchen utensils, she found something that made her stop abruptly. A dried red rose, with a small note attached to the stem. With trembling hands, she opened the paper and read the message written in elegant calligraphy. "For one who carries the beauty of resistance even amid storms." N. Her heart raced, and she looked around the empty kitchen as if expecting to find Nathan watching her from some dark corner. How had he entered without her hearing? And why did that simple gesture affect her so profoundly? During the days that followed, the mysterious gifts continued to appear. One morning, she found a copy of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers on her desk, in the small office where she organized the household chores. The pages were marked with passages underlined in blue ink, phrases that spoke of loneliness, desire, and the complexity of the female soul. On another occasion, she discovered a bracelet of red beads left on the windowsill of her room. When she examined it more closely, she noticed a small silver plate engraved on the inside. "Emma, for one who finds beauty in her own scar." Each gift left her more confused and restless. Nathan made no comment about them when they encountered each other in the corridors, maintaining the same courteous but distant posture he had adopted since the night of the proposal. But she felt his eyes upon her more frequently, a constant presence that made her question her own feelings. It was on a rainy April afternoon, while organizing the library books, that she made a discovery that would change everything. Looking for a volume of poetry that Nathan had requested, she moved a stack of old books and noticed that one of the floorboards creaked strangely under her weight. Curious, she knelt and pressed the wood, discovering that one of the boards was slightly loose. Carefully, she lifted the board and found a small hiding place that contained a diary bound in light pink leather. The name, Rebecca Marshall, was engraved in golden letters on the cover. Her hands trembled when she opened the diary to the first page, where she found a date from 3 years ago and the feminine, delicate handwriting that had written, "Today, Nathan asked me to marry him. I should be happy, but there's something in his eyes that frightens me. As if he loved me in a way that would completely consume me." Emma knew she shouldn't continue reading, but an irresistible force impelled her to discover more about the woman who had died in this house. The following pages revealed a disturbing portrait of an intense but suffocating relationship. Rebecca wrote about Nathan's obsessive love, about how he followed her discreetly, about the constant sensation of being watched. "He says he protects me, but sometimes I feel like I'm in a golden cage," said an entry dated 2 weeks before her death. "William, the family lawyer, warned me that Nathan is not the man he appears to be. He said there are things in his past that I should know. I'm beginning to be afraid." The name William made Emma pause. She had heard the staff mention the Blackwood family lawyer a few times, always in respectful but cautious tones. She continued reading, discovering that Rebecca suspected she was being followed by someone other than Nathan. "I found photographs of myself taken without my knowledge," one of the last entries reported. "Someone has been in my room going through my things. I don't know who to trust anymore. Nathan is traveling constantly, and when he's here, He seems like a stranger, and there's this constant feeling that someone is watching me through the windows. The last entry, dated the day of her death, contained only a few hurried lines. I discovered the truth. I can no longer stay here. If something happens to me, the blame is not entirely Nathan's. There is someone else, someone close, someone I trusted. Emma closed the diary with her heart racing, her hands violently trembling. The revelations she had read cast a new light on the tragedy that had devastated Nathan. If Rebecca was right, there was more to the story of her death than he knew. At that moment, she heard footsteps approaching the library. Quickly, she put the diary back in the hiding place and repositioned the loose board. When Nathan entered the library, she was pretending to organize books, but her accelerated breathing and flushed cheeks betrayed her. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked, noticing her agitation. "Yes, sir," she lied, avoiding his gaze. "The poetry book is there on the table." Nathan approached her, and Emma felt his presence like a wave of heat. He extended his hand and gently touched her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Emma," he said softly, "there's something I want to show you tonight, something that might help you understand why I made that proposal." She nodded silently, unable to speak, but in her mind, Rebecca's words echoed like a somber warning. There were secrets in this house that were even more dangerous than she had imagined. The revelation promised by Nathan that night never happened. When Emma went up to the master suite at the arranged time, she found only a note on the bed saying that he had been urgently called to Boston and would return in a few days. The sudden absence left her restless, especially after the disturbing discoveries in Rebecca's diary. It was as if the estate guarded its secrets with even more zeal in the absence of its owner. It was during Nathan's absence that William Carson made his appearance. On a sunny April afternoon, a silver BMW climbed the serpentine road leading to the manor. Emma watched from the main room window as an elegant man, appearing to be about 40, exited the vehicle with the ease of someone familiar with the place. William Carson possessed the kind of refined beauty found in the pages of high society magazines. Perfectly combed brown hair, an impeccable Italian-cut suit, and a smile that seemed rehearsed to disarm any resistance. When she answered the door, he greeted her with an almost excessive courtesy, kissing her hand in a way that lasted a few seconds longer than necessary. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice educated but carrying a familiarity that bothered her. "Nathan told me about you. I'm William Carson, the Blackwood family lawyer for over 15 years. May I come in?" She led him to the visiting room, serving coffee, while trying to decipher what was disturbing about this apparently gentle man. Perhaps it was the way his dark eyes analyzed her with an intensity that went beyond casual curiosity, or the way he moved through the house with the propriety of one who intimately knew every room. "Nathan didn't mention you were coming," she said, maintaining a respectful but cautious tone. "You don't need to call me sir, Emma. We're almost the same age, I imagine." His smile widened, revealing perfect teeth. "And as for Nathan, he rarely mentions his plans to others. It's a characteristic of the Blackwood family, the taste for drama and mystery." There was something in the way he said this that sounded like a veiled criticism. Emma served the coffee, noticing how William observed her attentively, as if evaluating each of her movements. "It must be difficult to work here alone," he continued, slowly sweetening his coffee. "This house has such an intense energy, especially after everything that happened with Rebecca." The name made Emma involuntarily shudder. Did you know Rebecca?" "I knew her very well," William responded, his tone becoming more serious. "She was a lovely young woman, but unfortunately too fragile to handle the intensity of Nathan's feelings. He can be overwhelming when he falls in love." "What do you mean?" William hesitated, as if pondering how far he could go. "Nathan has a complicated history with women, Emma. He idealizes them in a way that borders on obsession. Rebecca wasn't the first to suffer the consequences of that." Emma's heart accelerated. William's words echoed the concerns that Rebecca had written in her diary, but came from a source who claimed to know Nathan for years. "I don't understand why you're telling me this," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Because I'm concerned about you," he responded, leaning slightly forward. "I've seen how Nathan looks at you. It's the same look he had when he met Rebecca. And we know how that story ended." Emma rose abruptly, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I think you should leave. Nathan wouldn't be happy to know you're talking about his private matters. Nathan is institutionalized, Emma, William said calmly, making her stop mid-movement. What? He didn't go to Boston to close deals. He's in a private psychiatric clinic in Vermont. He's had episodes since Rebecca's death. Bouts of paranoia, hallucinations, obsessive-compulsive behavior. William stood and approached her slowly. I take care of his legal affairs when he's not... Well, Emma felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Everything began to make sense in a disturbing way. Nathan's sudden absence, the intense way he observed her, the strange words he had said that stormy night. You're lying, she whispered. Why would I lie about something so serious? William extended his hand to touch her arm, but she moved away. Emma, you need to know the truth. Rebecca discovered Nathan's medical history a few days before she died. She was afraid of him, afraid of what he might do when he discovered she was planning to leave him. Stop, she said, covering her ears with her hands. I don't want to hear any more. She died alone in that suite because she had a miscarriage caused by stress, William continued relentlessly. Nathan pressured her constantly, controlled every aspect of her life, followed her, intercepted her letters. She was desperate to escape. Tears streamed down Emma's face as the pieces of the puzzle fit together in a terrifying way. Rebecca's words in the diary, Nathan's disturbing intensity, the way he seemed to know her most intimate secrets. I have proof, William said softly, taking a folder from the briefcase he had left on the table. Medical reports, records of previous hospitalizations, even recordings that Rebecca made in her last days, when she was too afraid to sleep. Emma took the folder with trembling hands and opened it. The document seemed authentic. Reports from a private psychiatrist attesting to Nathan Blackwood's psychotic episodes, reports of 2 previous hospitalizations, and even a recording on a small digital device. Why are you showing me this? She asked, her voice broken. Because you have the right to know who you're dealing with, William responded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. And because I can help you get out of here before it's too late. At that moment, the house phone rang stridently, making them jump. Emma answered with a trembling hand. Emma? Nathan's voice on the other end of the line sounded tense, almost desperate. I need you to do something for me. Go to my suite and look for a sealed envelope in the desk drawer. William might be on his way there, and if he is, don't trust him. The line went dead, and Emma looked at William, who had visibly paled. There was something in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before, something cold and calculating that completely belied his gentle facade. The silence that followed Nathan's phone call was deafening. Emma observed William, noticing how his expression had subtly changed. The rehearsed smile had disappeared, replaced by a mask of poorly disguised tension. He quickly put the documents back in the folder, his movements now hurried and nervous. Emma, he said, his voice losing that gentle tone and acquiring an urgency that alarmed her. I need you to come with me now. Nathan is having another episode, and it's not safe for you to stay here when he returns. But something in the call had sounded genuinely desperate, not delusional, and the sudden change in William's behavior awakened all the survival instincts she had developed during years at the orphanage. Without answering, she left the room toward the stairs, hearing his heavy footsteps behind her. Emma, wait! You don't understand the danger you're in. She ran through the corridors to the master suite, her heart beating so hard it seemed to echo off the walls. When she reached Nathan's desk, her hands trembled as she opened the drawer he had mentioned. There was the sealed envelope, with her name written in the elegant calligraphy she had learned to recognize. William arrived at the suite door breathless, his hair now disheveled and his suit wrinkled. Don't open that, Emma. Those are just the delusions of a disturbed man. But she had already broken the seal. Inside the envelope were photographs, documents, and a handwritten letter. The photographs made her stagger. They were images of Rebecca, but not the romantic photos one would expect from a boyfriend. They were images taken without her knowledge, through windows, in intimate moments, some even when she was sleeping. But the shocking discovery came when she looked more carefully. The angle of the photos, the image quality, everything indicated that they had been taken from inside the house itself. And in the lower right corner of each photo, there was an almost imperceptible watermark. W.C. William Carson, she whispered, raising her eyes to find him standing in the doorway, all facade of gentleness now completely abandoned. You shouldn't have seen that, he said coldly, entering the suite and closing the door behind him. Rebecca shouldn't have discovered it either. Emma began to read Nathan's letter with trembling hands. "My dear Emma, if you are reading this, it means that William has finally decided to act. He was my best friend for 15 years, the man I trusted most in the world. But I discovered that he was obsessed with Rebecca from the moment he met her. He followed her, photographed her, even entered our room when we were out. Rebecca discovered this and came to tell me the day she died. She was terrified, said he had threatened to hurt her if she told me. I didn't fully believe it. William was like a brother to me. I left to confront him, and when I returned, she was dead. The doctor said it was the stress of the miscarriage, but I knew there was something more. I found hidden cameras in our room, installed by him. Rebecca died alone because I chose to protect the man who terrorized her. Forgive me for not telling you this before, but I needed proof. He falsified medical documents, created a false psychiatric history for me, all to discredit me if I discovered the truth. Nathan found out everything, said William, his voice now stripped of any pretense. Very clever, I must admit, but also too late, just as you discovered too late. Emma tried to run, but he blocked the door. For the first time, she noticed how physically imposing he was when he abandoned his gentle posture. His dark eyes shone with an obsession that she finally recognized, the same she had seen in the faces of men at the orphanage. Rebecca was special, he continued, approaching slowly. But you are different. There is a purity in you that Rebecca never had, an innocence that needs to be preserved. You're sick, she managed to say, desperately searching for an escape route. I'm passionate, he corrected. Rebecca rejected me, chose that cold, controlling man, but you can choose differently. We can leave together, start a new life far from here. Never, she said, with a firmness that surprised her. William's face hardened. Rebecca said the same thing, and see where it led her. At that moment, they heard the sound of tires on the gravel outside. Nathan had returned. William cursed under his breath and grabbed Emma's arm forcefully. We're leaving through the back door now. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are, he said, pulling a gun from his waist, the same way Rebecca would have if she hadn't been so stubborn. The confession hit her like lightning. You killed Rebecca. I liberated her, he said with a terrifying calmness, just as I will liberate you from Nathan. He is dangerous, obsessed. You deserve someone who truly loves you. Downstairs, they heard the main door open violently, and Nathan's hurried footsteps echoing through the corridors. He was shouting her name, his voice laden with genuine desperation. Last chance, said William, pressing the gun to her ribs. Come with me voluntarily, or I'll do to you what I did to Rebecca when she tried to scream. Emma closed her eyes, praying that Nathan would arrive in time, but also preparing to fight. She hadn't survived a difficult childhood and overcome her traumas to die at the hands of another obsessed man. When William slightly relaxed his vigilance to listen to the approaching footsteps, she drove her elbow into his stomach and ran toward the door. Nathan, she shouted with all the strength she possessed. He's here! He killed Rebecca! Emma's desperate cry echoed through the corridors of the estate like an ancestral lament. Nathan's footsteps became more hurried, climbing the stairs 2 at a time, while William violently pulled her back, the gun pressed against her temple. You shouldn't have screamed, he whispered in her ear, his breath hot and irregular. Rebecca also screamed at the end. It didn't help at all. The suite door burst open with a force that made the hinges creak. Nathan appeared like a human storm, his hair disheveled, his suit wrinkled from travel, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw William holding Emma with the gun, his face contracted in a mixture of pain and fury she had never witnessed. Let her go, William, said Nathan, his voice controlled but vibrating with a mortal tension. She has nothing to do with this. The problem is between us. She has everything to do with it, replied William, pulling Emma closer to himself, just like Rebecca did. You can't love without destroying, Nathan. You're an emotional parasite who sucks the life from the women you claim to love. Emma felt the gun barrel trembling against her skin. William was losing control, and that made him even more dangerous. Her eyes sought Nathan's, trying to silently communicate that she trusted him, despite everything that had happened. Rebecca told me everything before she died, continued Nathan, taking a cautious step toward them. How you followed her, how you installed cameras in our room, how you threatened to hurt her if she told me. She was pregnant and terrified, William. And you killed her for that. I liberated her, exploded William, the mask of sanity finally completely crumbling. She was trapped in a golden cage with you, always controlling, always possessing. At least with me, she would have been free to be truly loved. Free? Nathan's voice was a deadly whisper. You spied on her, stalked her, terrorized her, and when she said no, you killed her. That's not love, William. It's sickness. Emma felt William tremble against her, his breathing becoming more erratic. He was rapidly losing control, and she knew she needed to act before the situation became completely explosive. She was going to run away with you, William said to Nathan, tears streaming down his face. After everything I did for her, all the love I offered, she chose you, even knowing you would eventually destroy her. And that's why you poisoned her, said Nathan, revealing a truth that made Emma shudder. I found the digitalis vial hidden in your office. Rebecca didn't die from a spontaneous miscarriage. You slowly poisoned her, making it appear like natural complications. William laughed, a bitter, broken sound. She had a gentle death, much gentler than she deserved for rejecting me. And now Emma will understand that choosing you also has consequences. At that moment, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of trying to escape or begging for mercy, she turned in William's arms, coming face to face with him. Do you want to know the difference between you and Nathan? She said, her voice firm despite her fear. Nathan gave me a choice, made a proposal that I could accept or refuse. You are forcing me, and that reminds me of other men who tried to force me when I was a child at the orphanage. William's eyes widened, confused by the sudden change in dynamics. I also have scars, continued Emma. I was also broken by men who thought they could take what they wanted. But you know the difference? I chose to heal, you chose to hurt other people. The distraction worked. For a crucial moment, William lowered his guard, absorbed in her words. It was all Nathan needed. With a fluid movement, he lunged forward, grabbing the wrist that held the gun and twisting it violently. What followed was a brutal, desperate struggle. The two men rolled across the suite floor, fighting for control of the gun, knocking over furniture and breaking objects. Emma moved away, looking for something she could use as a weapon to help Nathan. A shot echoed through the room, deafening in the enclosed acoustics. For a terrible moment there was absolute silence. Then Nathan slowly rose, blood flowing from a cut on his forehead, but alive. William lay motionless on the floor, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, a red stain spreading across the Persian carpet beneath his body. Is he dead? Whispered Emma. Nathan checked William's pulse and nodded gravely. It was self-defense. He was going to kill you just as he killed Rebecca. Emma collapsed into a chair, her legs no longer able to support her. All the terror, all the tension accumulated in the past hours finally hit her at once. She began to cry, not delicate tears, but deep sobs that came from a very intimate place in her soul. Nathan knelt before her, taking her hands with infinite gentleness. His eyes were red, not only from the fatigue of the struggle, but from the tears he could no longer contain. Forgive me, he whispered, for everything, for bringing this violence into your life, for not protecting Rebecca when she needed it, for making that terrible proposal when you deserved so much more. She looked at him through her tears, seeing not the dangerous man William had described, but a wounded soul who had lost everything and desperately fought to protect the little that remained. You saved my life, she said simply. And you saved my soul, he replied, touching her face with a reverence that made her heart race for reasons completely different from fear. The weeks following William's death were a period of silent metamorphosis. The police had quickly concluded that it was self-defense, especially after Nathan handed over all the evidence he had collected about the lawyer's obsessive and criminal behavior. The case was filed, but the emotional scars took much longer to begin to heal. Nathan didn't leave the house for almost a month. He wandered through the estate like a ghost, trying to find its place among the living, organizing Rebecca's rooms for the last time, burning the photographs William had taken of her, exorcising the demons that had haunted those corridors for 3 long years. Emma observed this transformation from a respectful distance, offering silent presence when he needed it and space when the pain became unbearable. One May afternoon, as she organized the library books that had been scattered during the fight, Nathan appeared at the door carrying 2 cups of coffee. It was the first time he had prepared something for her, completely inverting the dynamic they had maintained for months. "May I sit?" he asked, with a humility she had never seen before. She nodded, watching him settle into the armchair that had become his refuge during those nights of revelations. He looked different, lighter somehow, as if an invisible weight had been removed from his shoulders. "I want to tell you everything," he said without preamble. "About Rebecca, about me, about why I made that terrible proposal. You deserve to know the man with whom you're sharing this house." Emma curled her legs under herself in the opposite armchair, preparing to hear truths that she suspected would be painful for both. "I met Rebecca at an art gallery in Boston," he began, his gaze lost in the flames dancing in the fireplace. "She was everything I wasn't, spontaneous, joyful, full of life. I had built my world on absolute control, on predictability, and she brought chaos in the best possible way." He paused, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. "But I didn't know how to love without possessing. I didn't know how to be vulnerable without trying to control the vulnerability of the other. I began to suffocate Rebecca without realizing it, justifying my possessiveness as protection, my obsession as deep love. And William took advantage of that," Emma said softly. "William knew me better than I knew myself," Nathan agreed bitterly. "He saw my insecurities and fed them, whispered poison in my ear about how I needed to protect Rebecca from other men, how she was too fragile for the cruel world out there. And all the while, he was the real danger." Emma extended her hand across the space between the armchairs, lightly touching his fingers. The contact was electric, but not frightening. It was comforting in a way she hadn't expected. "When Rebecca died," he continued, intertwining his fingers with hers, "I thought I had lost my only chance to feel something real. I spent 3 years believing I had killed her with my obsession, until I found you." "Nathan." "No," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. When I saw you for the first time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope, but also terror. Terror of repeating the same mistakes, of hurting you the same way. That's why I made that absurd proposal." He stood and knelt before her armchair, holding her hands with a reverence that made her heart race. "I thought that if it were just a transaction, just a night without promises, I could feel something without the risk of destroying. But I didn't understand that you were already healing me just by existing." Emma felt hot tears stream down her cheeks. "You healed me too, Nathan. Not in the way you thought, but by showing that it's possible to be seen, truly seen, and not be judged. Tell me," he asked softly, "about your scars, about what hurt you so much that you decided never to let anyone touch you again." It was Emma's turn to breathe deeply, preparing to reveal secrets she had buried for so long. "I was 12 when a new caretaker arrived at the orphanage. Brother Michael, he was called. He said I was special, that God had given me a beauty that needed to be preserved only for him." Nathan squeezed her hands, offering silent strength. "For months, he visited me at night. He said that if I told anyone, no one would believe me and I would be expelled from the orphanage. I had nowhere to go, so I endured. Until one night when I was 13, I managed to escape from my room and hide in the attic. What happened? He found me. And this time, when he tried to force me completely, I picked up a pair of scissors that was in the attic and cut him. On the face, on the neck, I screamed until the nuns came." Nathan closed his eyes, absorbing her pain as if it were his own. "They said I had seduced a man of God, that it was my fault. I was isolated for months. That's when I swore I would never let a man touch me again. It was safer to be alone." "But you're not alone anymore," he said, rising to sit on the arm of her chair. "And I'm not the man I was when I met Rebecca." She looked at him, seeing not the intimidating magnate or the man broken by guilt, but someone who had chosen to face his demons instead of being devoured by them. "What are we now?" she asked. "We're two people who found each other at the right time to heal one another," he answered, touching her face with infinite delicacy. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that true love isn't about possession. It's about shared freedom." When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness she had never imagined possible, and for the first time since she was 13, Emma didn't feel afraid, she felt at home. The months of June and July brought a gradual but profound transformation in the dynamic between Nathan and Emma. What had begun as a relationship marked by fear and distrust developed into something much more complex and beautiful, a careful dance between two people learning to trust not only each other, but themselves. Nathan had made a radical decision. He sold most of his businesses in Boston and began working remotely, dedicating himself to smaller projects that allowed him to spend more time at the estate. He was rediscovering the pleasure of simple things, preparing breakfast for Emma, reading poetry books in the library, walking through the gardens that had been neglected during his years of absence. Emma, in turn, ceased to be merely the housekeeper. Nathan insisted that she assume the role of property manager, recognizing her natural intelligence and organizational capacity. She began studying remotely, taking a business administration course through an online university, something she had always dreamed of but never thought possible. The intimacy between them grew organically. It began with conversations that extended into the late hours in the library, then evolved into morning walks through the gardens, where Nathan told her stories of the property and she shared her dreams of transforming the estate into something more welcoming. Small touches became natural, his hand in hers during a walk, his fingers pushing a strand of hair from her face, embraces that lasted a few seconds longer than necessary. One August night, as a gentle rain drummed against the library windows, Nathan was reading Emma a passage from Carson McCullers when she gently interrupted, "Nathan, do you still think about that proposal you made me?" He stopped mid-sentence, marking the page with his finger as he looked at her with surprise. "Why do you ask?" "Because I'd like to make a counter-proposal," she said, her heart beating rapidly but her voice steady. "Not for money, not for one night, but because I choose you. Because I choose to trust you with parts of me that I've never shown to anyone." Nathan slowly closed the book, his eyes fixed on hers. "Emma, are you sure? There's no rush. We can wait as long as you need." "I've waited long enough," she replied, rising from the armchair. "I've spent years allowing fear to control my life. But you've shown me that it's possible to be vulnerable without being violated, to be seen without being judged." He approached her but stopped when there was still space between them, waiting for her to set the pace. It was this delicacy, this constant consideration for her boundaries, that had completely won her heart. "If we do this," he said softly, "it will be because you want to, at the moment you choose, in the way you feel safe. No fantasies about salvation or healing through sex. Just two people who love each other, choosing to express themselves physically." "You love me?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "I love you in a way I didn't know was possible," he answered without hesitation. "I love you for your strength, for the way you survived and chose to be gentle despite the pain. I love you for your intelligence, for the way you see beauty in simple things. And I love you for your courage, the courage to trust again, to open your heart after being so hurt." Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of relief, not pain. "I love you too. I love how you look at me as if I were precious, but never fragile. I love how you gave me choices when others tried to take everything away." They moved toward each other until there was no more space between their bodies. When he kissed her this time, there was a different urgency, a hunger that had been carefully nurtured through months of emotional intimacy. "Here?" she asked, looking around the library. "Wherever you want," he answered. "Your room, my room, or we can go up to the master suite. Rebecca is gone, Emma. Those ghosts no longer have power over me." She took him by the hand and led him upstairs, toward the master suite. It was a symbolic gesture. She was choosing not only to be with him, but also to help transform a space that had been haunted by tragedy into a place of renewed love. When they reached the room, Nathan lit only a few candles, creating an intimate but not somber atmosphere. He had removed all objects that belonged to Rebecca, replacing them with fresh flowers and books they had read together. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time. In response, she began to slowly unbutton his shirt, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. Each button undone was a barrier removed. Each piece of clothing that fell to the floor was a past being left behind. When they finally lay together in the bed that had witnessed so much suffering, they did so with an almost sacred reverence. Nathan touched each of her emotional scars with soft kisses, whispering words of adoration and promises of protection. Emma explored his body with a curiosity that had been denied for years, discovering that desire could be beautiful when born of mutual trust. It wasn't perfect. It rarely is the first time between two people carrying so much history of pain. There were moments of hesitation, unexpected tears, pauses to reassure and comfort, but it was real, it was chosen, it was love in its purest form. Afterward, lying intertwined as the rain continued its gentle song on the windows, Emma realized that something fundamental had changed in her. The armor she had carried for years had finally dissolved, not through force, but through the constant gentleness of a man who had learned to love without possessing. 6 months later, at the beginning of the spring in September, the Blackwood estate breathed a completely different energy. The windows remained open during the day, allowing natural light to bathe corridors that had previously lived immersed in dimness. The garden, revitalized by Emma's loving attention, displayed an explosion of colors that transformed the property into a living work of art. The red roses she had planted near the main entrance flourished exuberantly, like symbols of the passion that had been reborn in that place. Emma was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she felt Nathan's familiar arms wrap around her waist. She leaned against his chest, feeling his warmth spread throughout her body in a way that never ceased to surprise her. Even after all these months together, his ability to make her feel safe and desired at the same time continued to be a daily discovery. "Good morning, my love," he murmured against her neck, depositing a soft kiss on the curve between her shoulder and nape. "How did you sleep?" "Perfectly," she replied, turning in his arms to face those grey-blue eyes that had become her refuge. "And you?" "No nightmares tonight." "I haven't had nightmares for months," he said, caressing her face. "It's hard to have nightmares when I wake up every day beside the woman I love." They had developed a morning routine that had become sacred. Coffee prepared together, shared newspaper reading on the veranda, discussions about plans for the property, and inevitably kisses that frequently led them back to the bedroom before any serious work could be done. On that specific morning, however, Nathan seemed slightly nervous. Emma noticed that he checked the clock more times than normal and that his fingers drummed on the kitchen table in an anxious rhythm. "Is everything all right?" she asked, serving coffee in the porcelain cups that had become their favorites, a gift he had brought from a trip to Newport where they had gone together the previous month. "Actually," he said, breathing deeply, "there's something I want to show you, something I've been preparing for weeks." Emma tilted her head, curious. During the months they had lived together, Nathan had shown himself full of small surprises. Books he knew she would love, flowers left in unexpected places, romantic dinners prepared by himself on nights when she studied late. But there was something different in his expression this morning, a mixture of expectation and vulnerability that aroused her curiosity. "What is it?" she asked, approaching and touching his face with affection. "Wear something beautiful," he said, smiling in a way that made her heart race. "We're going to take a walk through the gardens." Half an hour later, they walked hand in hand along the stone paths that Emma had redesigned, transforming the formal, rigid garden into something more organic and welcoming. The changes to the property perfectly reflected the transformation in their own lives. Where before there had been rigidity and control, now spontaneity and joy flourished. Nathan led her to an area of the garden where she rarely went, near the old gazebo that had remained abandoned for years. But as they approached, Emma gasped in surprise. The gazebo had been completely restored, painted pristine white, with flowing linen curtains that danced in the morning breeze. In the center, there was a small table set for two, with her favorite flowers, white lilies and pink roses, arranged in a delicate display. "Nathan," she whispered, moved. "It's beautiful." "When did you do all this?" "Over the last 3 weeks, whenever you were studying or sleeping," he admitted, looking proud and nervous at the same time. "I wanted to create a place that was ours, completely ours, without any shadow of the past." They climbed the gazebo steps, and Emma noticed that there was champagne cooling in a silver bucket and what appeared to be a small blue velvet box beside her glass. "Nathan," she said, her heart beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. "What is this?" He turned to her, taking her hands in his, and she saw that there were tears in his eyes, but they were tears of happiness, not pain. "Emma," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "a year ago I was a broken man living among ghosts, convinced that I would never be capable of loving again without destroying. You not only showed me that I was wrong, you taught me what it means to truly love." He knelt before her, taking the small box, and Emma felt her legs weaken. "You taught me that true love isn't about possessing or controlling. It's about choosing every day to build something beautiful together. It's about being vulnerable without fear, about growing alongside someone instead of trying to mold them to your image. When he opened the box, it revealed an engagement ring that left her breathless. It wasn't ostentatious or flashy, but perfectly elegant. A solitary diamond set in white gold surrounded by small stones that sparkled like stars. "Emma Richardson," he said, his voice trembling but firm, "will you marry me? Not because you need protection or security, but because you choose to build a life by my side? Because you believe, as I believe, that we can be better together than we ever would be apart?" Tears now flowed freely down her face. A year ago, she was a woman haunted by traumas, unable to imagine that she could trust someone enough to share not only her body but her soul. Now, looking at the man kneeling before her, she saw not only her future, but the bravest version of herself. "Yes," she whispered, then repeated louder, "Yes, I want to marry you." When he slid the ring onto her finger, it was as if a part of her that she didn't even know was broken finally healed. They kissed there in the gazebo, surrounded by the beauty they had created together, as the morning sun bathed them in its golden light. "There's one more thing," said Nathan when they finally separated, his eyes shining with a joy she had never seen before. "I want you to know that no matter where life takes us, you will never again be just the housekeeper, just the manager, just anything. You will be my partner in every sense, in business, in life, in dreams we have yet to discover. And you," she responded, touching his face with infinite adoration, "will never again be just the broken man I met in this house. You will be my husband, my best friend, the father of the children we might have one day." They spent the entire morning in the gazebo, planning their future, talking about the dreams they had discovered together. Nathan wanted to transform part of the property into a refuge for women who had suffered trauma, a place where they could find healing and a new beginning. Emma wanted to finish her degree and perhaps write a book about overcoming and true love. As the sun rose in the sky, painting the world around them in golden and rosy hues, they knew with absolute certainty that they had found something rare and precious. It wasn't just love, it was redemption, it was healing, it was proof that two broken people can come together and create something whole and beautiful. The Blackwood estate, which had once echoed with cries of pain and whispers of dark secrets, now resonated with laughter, plans for the future and the promise that true love always finds a way, even through the deepest darkness.